Revivals Part 2. Enlightenment in the Land of the Plumed Serpent. This will be a bit of a crash course on several topics, but I feel like it's an important backdrop before we jump into the American revivals. In Part 1, we talked about the Asbury Revival and its lack of a clear gospel message. We considered the differing definitions of revival and lack of biblical precedent for events designed to spur a renewal of faith among believers under the New Covenant. Now we'll look at the cultural climate surrounding the Reformation and first revivals. So, the Scientific Revolution and Age of Enlightenment. Ecclesiastes 1:9 says, "What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun." The Scientific Revolution and Age of Enlightenment are key to the Great Awakening and its revivals, as they represent a return to the mystery school teachings, which maintain the serpent's divinity of man. You know the story. Now the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field that the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God actually say, 'You shall not eat of any tree in the garden'?" And the woman said to the serpent, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said, 'You shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it, lest you die.' But the serpent said to the woman, 'You will not surely die. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil.' So the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise. She took it of its fruit and ate, and she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths." The Scientific Revolution was spearheaded by mathematician, astronomer, Freemason Nicholas Copernicus, 1473 to 1543, and culminated in the works of theologian, author, alchemist, and Freemason Isaac Newton, 1642 to 1776. A quick note on Freemasonry. Some will argue that Freemasonry did not originate until 1717 with the formation of the Grand Lodge of England, but the philosophy, symbolism, and esoteric teachings of speculative Freemasonry trace back to the Rosicrucians, Knights Templar, Hermeticism, Kabbalah, and ultimately the ancient mystery schools, which is the religion of the God of this world. Freemasonry was always about building, but architecture was merely the outward expression of the reconstruction of lost ancient wisdom of Atlantis, the antediluvian age, intent on shaping and controlling society, its end being the deification of man, the ultimate rebellion against God. Everything the enemy does is a counterfeit, an inversion of the truth. Ephesians 2:19 through 22 says, "Now therefore you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God, having been built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone, in whom the whole building, being fitted together, grows into a holy temple in the Lord, in whom you also are being built together for a dwelling place of God in the Spirit." Many Christians believe that Newton was a Christian, but while he was a Protestant, many of his private works were occult studies, which is not surprising, given his secret society affiliation. But getting back to the Enlightenment science, it's been argued that the development of modern science should be presented in two phases. the Scientific Renaissance in the 15th and 16th centuries, which focused on restoring the natural knowledge of the ancients, and the Scientific Revolution of the 17th century, when scientists shifted from recovering ancient knowledge to innovation. For example, in Wikipedia, it states, "The era of the scientific renaissance focused to some degree on recovering the knowledge of the ancients and is considered to have culminated in the 1687 Isaac Newton publication Principia, which formulated the laws of motion and universal gravitation, thereby completing the synthesis of a new cosmology." Unquote. Wow. Heliocentrism's role in this great deception of our age is huge, but I'm going to leave that for a later time. Okay, the Enlightenment, roughly 1715 to 1789, followed on the heels of the Scientific Revolution. It represented a great shift away from faith in absolute religious or political authority to faith in scientific reason, grounded in empiricism, and secularism, or separation from religion. It was the birth of humanist individualism, with optimistic ideas about human nature, seeing man as essentially good, instead of what the Bible teaches, that man is dead in his sin and has no life in himself whatsoever. In John 6:53, Jesus said, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat of the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in yourselves." That's a deep teaching. We won't go to depth, but the point being there, you have no life in yourselves. Ephesians 2:1, and you were dead in your trespasses and sins. Colossians 2:13, when you were dead in your transgressions and the uncircumcision of your flesh, he made you alive together with him, having forgiven us all our transgressions. Francis Bacon, 1561 to 1626, occultist and author of the New Atlantis, is known as the father of empiricism. He's recognized for developing the scientific method and a philosophy of science that emphasized observation, experimentation, and inductive reasoning. Enlightenment ideas were largely based on the works of Bacon and his fellow Freemason John Locke, 1632 to 1704. Did you know that Locke was involved in the African slave trade? I did not. Anyway, the Scientific Revolution and Age of Enlightenment established a new way of thinking, sweeping away the old. In step with the Enlightenment, Great Awakening preachers referred to the new light as a fresh revelation of the gospel, as opposed to the old light held by conventional Christianity. Coincidence, huh? Championed as progress, the Scientific Revolution and Age of Enlightenment were in reality merely a return to ancient mystery school thought. We've read and seen videos about the mystery schools, their mother-son sex cults, sun worship, and seen the symbolism just about everywhere. But to understand how the Enlightenment affected the great American revivals, we need to take a more practical look at how the mystery schools controlled the ancient world. And a good way to do that, and since enlightened thinker Francis Bacon wrote about it, is to visit the subject of Atlantis. Atlantis University. Who is the one who is wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? 1 Corinthians 1:20. In Francis Bacon's unfinished utopian novel, The New Atlantis, published posthumously in 1626, the Americas are presented as the location of the lost mythical civilization of Atlantis. From the novel, quote, About 3,000 years ago, or somewhat more, the great Atlantis that you call America abounded then in tall ships. Of all this there is with you sparing memory, or none, but we have large knowledge thereof." Unquote. Several physical places have been suggested as the possible location of Atlantis, but as Freemason Manly P. Hall explained in his lectures, Bacon's Atlantis was not a city or country. Rather, his novel presents a university of thought. Like universities today, Bacon's Atlantis taught all manner of public thought, including science, mathematics, and governance. In light of that, it is noteworthy how many of our universities, Bible colleges, and seminaries have been founded by the Jesuits and Freemasons. Plato, 5th century BCE, also described the mythical city in his work Timaeus. Hall discusses Plato's Atlantis in his Secret Destiny of America. Quote, "The destruction of Atlantis, as described by Plato, can be interpreted as a political fable. The tradition of the lost empire, as descended from Solon, was enlarged and embellished according to the formulas of the Orphic theology, but it does not follow necessarily that Plato intended to disparage the idea that a lost continent had actually existed west of Europe. Plato was a philosopher. He saw in the account of the fall of Atlantis an admirable opportunity to summarize his convictions concerning government and politics." Unquote. The idea of Atlantis being a physical place was popularized by Theosophist Helena Blavatsky, 1831 to 1891. Her and Donovan. I would play this for you. It's a clip from Atlantis by Donovan, but I'll probably get a YouTube strike for it, so I'll let you go to the site and play that. Blavatsky dated the continent of Atlantis to an evolutionary 850,000 years ago in her 1877 book, Isis Unveiled. Blavatsky insisted that Plato, an initiate, deliberately used hidden language in his dating of the island 9,000 years ago. Quote, "Regardless of whether it ever existed physically, it is likely that these same intellectual ideals governed the great civilization in Noah's day, when men did only evil all the time. Genesis chapter 11 records how, after God destroyed that evil generation with the great flood, men reformed Atlantis in Babylon. God dispersed the people by confusing their languages and separating the earth in the days of Peleg, but Atlantis was formed once again in Alexandria and Athens, and Bacon's novel suggests in the great Mayan and Aztec empires." These Atlantean ideals are the natural knowledge of the ancients that were supposedly rediscovered by the key figures of the scientific Renaissance, Scientific Revolution, and Age of Enlightenment. The same ideals are the stated goals of those wanting to bring about a great coming world religion and governance. What's remarkable is how they're utilizing Christianity to bring it all about. The blend of Enlightenment thought and Protestantism that holds the betterment of humanity over the individual soul brings the words of Theosophist Alice Bailey, 1880 to 1949, to mind. Quote, "The Christian Church is in its many branches, can serve as a St. John the Baptist, as a voice crying in the wilderness, and as a nucleus through which world illumination may be accomplished. I indicate the hope. I do not assert a fact. Its work is intended to be the holding of a broad platform, The Church must show a wide tolerance and teach no revolutionary doctrines or cling to any reactionary ideas. The Church as a teaching factor should take the great basic doctrines and, shattering the old forms in which they are expressed and held, share their true and inner spiritual significance. The prime work of the Church is to teach, and to teach ceaselessly, preserving the outer appearance in order to reach the many who are accustomed to church usages. Teachers must be trained, Bible knowledge must be spread, the sacraments must be mystically interpreted, and the power of the Church to heal must be demonstrated. All of this is going to be so important as we go on, how we see all of this playing out in the revivals. It all just reads like a playbook for what has been done to Protestantism. Anyway, carrying on here with her quote. There is no question, therefore, that the work to be done in familiarizing the general public with the nature of the mysteries is of paramount importance at this time. These mysteries will be restored to outer expression through, ready, the medium of the Church and the Masonic fraternity. If those groups leave off being organizations with material purpose and become organisms with living objectives, unquote. See, the Church is pivotal to their plan, which is Satan's plan. I mean, I'm not going on some conspiratorial witch hunt after some evil people in the world here. What I'm trying to frame out is that the God of this world is working through these secret societies and these very real occultists to bring about his ultimate goal. And to do that, he needed to infiltrate and subvert Christianity. But let's read on here. Is America a Freemasonic Jesuit experiment? Is its tolerant, self-worshipping, social cause-promoting Christianity all designed to extinguish the gospel, undo the Reformation, and bring about a return to Catholicism, aka, and more, of the mystery schools? Don't doubt it. If you've been following the development of the New World Order for any length of time, you're aware of these changes in the Church today. But there's still a lot of confusion and arguing over various church doctrines, all of which really boil down to law and mysticism. Carnality. Revelation 12:15 states, Then from his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river, to overtake the woman and sweep her away with the torrent. Let's look at what else was going on in the days of Bacon and Locke. Roughly chronologically, we've got the Scientific Renaissance in the 14 and 1500s, the Reformation in the early 1500s, Reformers and Separatists beginning to settle in North America in the 15 to 1600s, Francis Bacon, 1561 to 1626, Jesuit missions to North America, late 1500s, early 1600s, and John Locke, 1632 to 1704. Europa, Amaru, and the missions of the Jesuits. As Protestants fled the persecution of the Roman Church in Europe in the 16th and 17th centuries, the Jesuits, recall the Jesuit oath from Part 1, were conquering and converting the people of the Americas to Catholicism. In South America, the god of the Aztecs and Mayans was Quetzalcoatl, also known as the bearded white god. So, when the bearded white men came to their land, the natives believed it was their god returning, making the mission to convert the natives more successful there, although the conversions played out like more of a blending of faiths, which is what the enemy does anyway. He comes in and blends his faith with. So now we've blended this blatantly demonic religion here with an already infiltrated Christianity through Roman Catholicism. Anyway, in North America and Peru, Quetzalcoatl was known as the two-headed god Amaru. Like the phoenix, quote, Amaru represents the blending of the realms. It represents the sudden and sometimes violent overturning of the established order. Quotes from Symbol Sage. The tribes of North America and Peru resisted conversion, and the Jesuit missions in North America arguably played out as more of an ethnic cleansing there, tragically. Just in time for the settlers to begin arriving from Europe. That whole time period is an interesting study. It's tragic. Anyway, skipping ahead, what's in a name? America, Amaruca. So we're told that America was named after the explorer Amerigo Vespucci, but the name more likely comes from the Incan two-headed serpent god Amaru, plumed serpent or feathered serpent. Amaruca is literally translated land of the plumed serpents. And then we've got Europe and Europa. Europa is the goddess after which Europe is named. She's an appellation of Isis, or the goddess of 10,000 names that include Mary, the Queen of Heaven. It strikes me that if these gods represent demonic principalities over the regions of the earth, Protestantism and its revivals could never have flourished in Europe like it did in America. I don't know, just a thought. Here are a couple of links. You can read more about Europa. I'm not going to take the time to go there. But this history has much bearing on America's great revivals, which has served to both lead Christianity back to papal teachings and to the mystery school, mysticism, to cover for its false gospels, which were unable to produce genuine Christian experience, if that makes sense. Galatians 1, verses 6 and 7 says, turning to a different gospel, which is really no gospel at all. Evidently, some people are throwing you into confusion and are trying to pervert the gospel of Christ. Okay, next time we'll look at some of the most prominent revivalists and the new teachings that they brought. God bless. Stay watchful.